Hello, my name is Rosalind Lawrence, and thank you for joining this breakout session. This session is entitled Effective Teaching Strategies. Um, Here at Cleveland ISD, I am the coordinator of student engagement and one of the district truancy officers. And today, again, the breakout session that I will be leading is called Effective Teaching Strategies. In the bottom right corner of our dive presentation right here, you can see we have a QR code. If you don't mind, if you could take a minute to complete that QR code, it's just basic information because I want to I want to help expand your professional learning community by connecting all of you guys together, in addition to sharing this PowerPoint presentation with you at the end. So if you don't mind, take a moment to complete that QR code. Then I would give them a few minutes. It only has 4 basic questions. Shouldn't take very long. So, like how we start every session and group breakout, is we start by using good news. We are a Capturing Kids Heart district. And with that, we have certain strategies that we use, and this is one of the strategies that aligns with our district expectations. So take a moment in your cooperative groups to go ahead and talk and discuss those good news. Now, while they're doing that, I'll explain how I have my breakout session set up. Each and every teacher is set up at a cooperative station. Each cooperative station has 4 different desks, 4 desks connected together, because as we go through this PowerPoint presentation, there will be time where we have to think, pair, share within our groups. And at the end of the presentation, we will apply what we're learning. We'll do it independently. Well, we'll do it together. Then we'll do it within our groups, and then we'll come back out and break out and share. So again, the title of this breakout session is Effective Teaching Strategies. By the end of this session, all participants will, 1, identify key evidence-based teaching strategies. So we're going to go over teaching strategies that have proven to be effective and that get student achievement. We're going to explore methods of differentiating instructions. We're going to learn practical classroom application and how to integrate technology. And then we're going to reflect on our own instructional practices and then reflect on how to adapt these strategies into our classroom. And when I say these strategies, I'm not saying all. If you could just use one of these strategies, then I will feel like I've accomplished something. If you can incorporate one of these strategies into your classroom. So let's first identify, why do teaching strategies matter? Well, research has shown that effective teaching has the greatest impact on student achievement, and that quality strategies improve student engagement, retention of the information, and improve critical thinking skills. Teaching strategies matter because you have to align your classroom goals with the district and state expectations for student-centered learning. So again, why do teaching strategies matter? Well, number 1, student achievement, quality strategies, and then learning, student-centered learning. Okay, so what are the core principles of effective instructions? So in all of these strategies, of course, no strategy will work if you don't have these things. Number 1, if you haven't set a clear learning goal, what are you hoping your students will achieve? Not hope, what are your students going to achieve? And then you need to have active student engagement, which is what all these strategies give you, ongoing feedback, differentiation in instruction, and then reflection and continuous improvement. So again, these are the core principles of effective instructions. Now, let's take a moment in our group and let's think about, out of these core principles, which in your opinion is the most important? So in your group, let's take 2 minutes to think about that question and let's come back and share. So which of these do you feel are the most important? So we're going to move right on after we've shared and discussed why we think that's the most important. Hopefully that only takes 3 to 5 minutes. 2 minutes in your group, 3 minutes to share with the class, and kind of just take a moment to identify who thought this, who thought that. And we're going to move into our first effective teaching strategy. The first effective teaching strategy that we're going to talk about today is elicit instructions. Now, when you initially hear that first word elicit, you kind of think, ugh, does that mean anything negative? Because when we hear that, it often is tied to a negative connotation. But in this instant, it just means direct instruction. So here, the teacher here is identifying what do they mean by elicit teaching processes. Well, number one, the teacher sets a learning goal. Number two, the teacher is going to break it into steps. Number three, the teacher is going to guide the student practice. Four, the teacher is going to model and explain. And five, the teacher is going to provide feedback. And then six, students apply that independently. So let's take, for example, in an athletic girls basketball practice, we may want to learn reverse layups. So the coach will start out by saying, today we're going to talk about and learn reverse layups. Oftentimes, when you're on the baseline attacking the basket, you beat your defender, but there's oftentimes help. How do you beat the next defender? Well, one way to do that is to continue past that defender and shoot the ball on the opposite side of the basket, which we call a reverse layup. So then, as the coach, I would then demonstrate and break down the proper steps to shooting a reverse layup. We would start out by attacking, like I said, the baseline, and then taking an angle to where when we do make it to under the basket, we can step out, step in, and then flick the ball right over our head using our wrist. I would then tell the kids to spread out at the three baskets where the coaches are stationed. And now we're going to make three different lines and we're going to practice while the coaches guide and critique their reverse layups. Students spread out, students attempt, coaches critique. We provide feedback, and now we break up into 6 baskets. Well, now they're getting maximum reps at reverse layups. And then if we want to take it up another step, we would then throw in defense, where the defense would then roll the ball to the offensive person, hence getting the offensive person an advantage because the defender is having to judge the pace of the ball, which means that person's closeout wouldn't be as accurate as it normally would be, giving the offensive person a little bit of an advantage, but also making it to where they would have to use a reverse layup in order to score on the defender. So again, one of the first strategies is elicit instruction, or better known as direct instructions. I'm sure a lot of you have already doing this model in your classroom. You just never have heard the term. Another example that I found that's very relatable is in English classes. When students are tasked with writing an essay, oftentimes the teachers start out with identifying the thesis, and which identifies the main points, and then moving on from there, and then writing an actual paper. So they put it in steps to help students prior to them actually writing the paper. So thesis, and then intro, and then body with support and evidence, etc. Our next effective teaching strategy is cooperative learning groups. So, what are cooperative learning? Well, it's students work together to accomplish a shared goal. The benefits of this is that it builds communication, collaboration, and accountability. Some examples of cooperative learning, which you guys just participated in, is when you think, pair, share. Now, take a moment at our groups and let's discuss what are some other examples of cooperative learning instructions or strategies. take a moment, come back in the group, share, and then we continue on. Now, what I found is that cooperative learning is an effective strategy to use in your classroom. However, you have to establish those group norms where you assign clear roles, especially if you're having to gather material, especially if you're in a time crunch, which we usually are. So you're going to need to have a timer. You're going to need to have I call them a leader. You're going to need to have a material gatherer. And then I have a person that I call the writer, the recorder. So typically my cooperative groups are made up of 4 people. Again, the leader and or task manager, the writer or recorder, the timer, and then material gatherer. And this, of course, you want these different roles to rotate amongst the people in your group. So having assigned roles ensure that everybody knows what they're responsible for, and more importantly, it just helps make the group move smoother. Once you've done this several times in your classroom, this is easy. It's like, it's nothing, like it's just a part of your everyday procedures. But I think if you want to use cooperative strategies, learning strategies, then the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to take time to discuss what are the group expectations, what they look like, what are the roles. And then I pretty much keep mine to a minimum of 4 people. And that's the max as well, 4 people. Because I found that larger groups, outside of that, you often have 1 or 2 people doing the work. Even 4 sometimes becomes tricky. But when giving everybody tasks and just being overly organized, it in my opinion, it works. It fosters active engagement, and then it helps with their social and interpersonal skills, and then they collectively problem solve. So this is one of the effective strategies is cooperative learning groups. You can click on these hyperlinks when you're back in your classroom and you reference back to this PowerPoint presentation. Each one has an example of what these look like. And again, we just modeled think, pair, share, but we did it in a group of 4. If you're in a math class, then you can sit your kids in pairs. You don't necessarily have to be in 4s. And you can click on these links, and there's a short video that's about 2 to 3 minutes and explains each one of those cooperative strategies. Another effective teaching strategy is to differentiated instructions. So what exactly does that mean? Well, the goal of differentiating instruction is to meet the diverse academic, linguistic, and social emotional needs of every student. So basically, you meet students where they are. And you do that by increasing their engagement and achievement while providing support. So, ways to differentiate. You can do that through your content. So, what students learn. You can do that through your processes, how they learn. You can do that through your product, which is how they show they understand. You can do that through the environment, the learning setting. So, an example of differentiating through products would be creating a choice board or having a tier assignment. So, what I mean by a choice board is you give students the opportunity to show you that they understand what you just taught by the product that they make or that they complete. So, they can, write a short paragraph explaining what we learned, draw an image of what we learned, um, draw a diagram explaining what we learned, make a mini doc of what we learned. So you give students the opportunity. Because I've always taught freshmen, I typically always teach freshmen and sophomore. I don't really give them too much choice. I kind of limit theirs. It's either A or B. Sometimes I do ABC, but giving them too many choices, they'll get off task or it'll take them too long to decide. So I usually say AB. You got this or you got that. I'll have it on the board. You can do it this way or you can do it that way. Oftentimes, I always let them draw an image, but I tell them your image needs to be detailed. And within our choice board selection, there has each one has certain criteria that they have to have. Because I'm not a good drawer, so I don't expect them to draw me a Monet. But at the same time, I expect it to have some sort of details. You can even incorporate, words like radio if you're not good at drawing a radio, or I just want to be able to look at your image and understand what you're trying to portray, but more importantly understand that you understand what today's objective is. So our first strategy again was elicit instructions. Our second strategy is differentiating our instructions. So our next strategy is formative assessments. Uh, Now, this is something that I know each and every person is probably doing in their classroom. There's so many different tools to use when using effective formative assessments. And formative assessments, the purpose of those is to guide instructions and provide feedback in real time. So, how do you know your students understand? Well, you have them complete an exit ticket, you have them do a quick write, you have a poll, you do a mini quiz, you do a discussion, but all those things happen in real time. Another thing I found is when you're doing this throughout your lesson, you really want to focus on the data that you're receiving. So if you're going to do an exit ticket, you need to read that exit ticket the day you gave that exit ticket. That way you can identify if the students understand what you taught, so that if they didn't, you can go back and reteach the concept, but more importantly, you can adjust your pace. Uh, when I was a baby teacher, and I was learning how to teach others, not realizing that I could make a connection to what I was doing in coaching and kind of tie my classroom into that. Because what I found is the effective strategies that I'm learning in the teaching world, I directly apply those to the coaching world and vice versa. But the story I was going to tell is how I know in the coaching world we're oftentimes busy. We have games, et cetera, et cetera. And I found that those exit tickets, I have to grade them the night of. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a short question, so you can really flip through them because I didn't, and my class missed the whole concept of what I was trying to teach. Another thing that I found that happened as a baby teacher through formative assessments is that my lessons often got better towards the end of the day versus the beginning of the day, which I had to figure out how to make adjustments with that by actually running through my lessons, the important, like the meat of the lesson of what I wanted the students to learn, like playing that, replaying that, looking in the mirror, talking to myself, because I found it happening quite often that my early classes weren't performing as well as my afternoon classes. So that's just what I learned through my self reflection. So again, we've talked about illicit strategies, or I'm sorry, illicit instructions. We've talked about cooperative learning groups, and now we just discussed formative assessments. The next strategy is technology integration. And in today's world, you as a educator have to incorporate technology. And you don't necessarily have to incorporate technology by saying your students have to be on their device every day in order to be incorporating technology. That not necessarily. You don't have to, because what I found is with the younger kids, they oftentimes, they go a little, they abuse their privilege of technology. So but nevertheless, technology is not there to serve as the teacher. Technology is there. You integrate technology to enhance what you're teaching. It does not replace the effectiveness of pedagogy. Again, it just enhances what you're teaching and you use it as a resource to further your students' skill or to make a connection with the modern world. I know here at Cleveland ISD, we have a technology department like most school districts, and they have a plethora of of of, of technology and different platforms that you can use to help enhance your students' engagement level. And I put some of those interactive platforms, such as Nearpod, Edpuzzle, some of those collaborative tools that we use, Google Workspace, Google Doc, anything in that Google space, Google presentation. We've learned that multiple students can work on the same presentation at one time. Some of the assessment tools, Kahoot, quizzes, Canvas. So just integrating that technology piece. I also integrate technology by using, again, the ones that are chosen by my district. And then on the front end, it's a lot of work, but on the back end, it makes your life so much easier. So I use Canvas to grade my test. I use Canvas for almost everything now. It's just once I've got all our tests uploaded into Canvas, it just makes everything move so smoothly, and students can get real time results immediately, which in return helps the turnover of reteach. It's not those days that lag in between because you have to go grade. So again, incorporating technology is and integrating it is great. Using these platforms through your school and making it a resource within your classroom. But again, it's there to enhance. It's not there to replace. So my tip is I would choose tech that aligns with learning goals and not just novelty. So use the technology that your technology department and that your school pays for. And typically you can find all that through ClassLink. And if you find something that's new and you think it aligns with what you're teaching and it can further enhance your students' engagement level, then meet with your department head who can then put in requests, because a lot of times there's money set aside for things like that, and you can share it with not just your discipline but all the subjects across the board. So we've talked about strategies, our first strategy of elicit instructions, our strategy of cooperative learning, our strategy of differentiated instructions, our strategy of formative assessment. We talked about integrating technology into our lesson, and again, making it to where it enhances, it doesn't take the place of effective pedagogy. Our next effective teaching strategy is to incorporate cultural responsive while teaching. So, what do I mean by that? Incorporate a variety of examples and materials in your teaching that reflects the demographics, the statistics of your town, and your school. So, get to know your students. Encourage students to share their cultural backgrounds. Encourage students to relate lessons to real life experiences. In the subject that I teach, that I've taught most of my career, it was geography. So it was very easy to incorporate appropriate cultural responsive teaching, because we talked about all the cultures over the world. And we learned to respect different religions, and we just got into it, and we learned a lot about each other while understanding our differences and embracing those differences, and just doing it in a very respectful way. By doing this, you really get an understanding of who your students are, where they come from, which explains some of the challenges they have, some of the misconceptions that they may have. So it's very important to dig into that and to use this strategy in your teaching every day. So again, use diverse examples and materials. Encourage your students to share their culture, and then connect lessons to the everyday life of your students. Our next effective teaching strategy is reflective practice. Reflective practice helps students learn better. It allows them to understand what they learn, see their strengths and weaknesses, and improve their future performances. This process enhances critical thinking, memories, builds self awareness, and has a growth mindset and develops important professional skills into professional skills like adapting to a new situation. And that came directly from the Institute of Teaching and Learning. So, reflective practice is where you journal, peer observation, video recording. Again, sports coaches have been doing this for years, trading and watching film. The best teacher is to watch yourself on video. Once you've learned that um, criticism, that there's a difference between criticism and cut downs, and that if your coach is showing you things that you're doing wrong on film or trying to correct on and a trying to correct an activity that or a move you've been doing wrong, or a read that you've been reading wrong in a game. Once you learn that that's going to improve your play and improve who you are, then and you can take that without taking it personal. In my opinion, this is probably one of the most effective practices. Again, as a coach and as a former college athlete, I've been watching film on myself since, I played in high school. So it's nothing to me to be able to be critiqued, or to watch videos, or to self-reflect on what I've done. To more importantly, look at things and say, what could I have done better? Or why did it end up this way? When did it happen? It doesn't mean that, you know, I'm a terrible person or that it's intentional. It's just identifying what works well, what could be improved, and then how did you respond, or how did the students respond. Um, I think that, for example, veteran teachers, they have a really good understanding of this. If you've been a veteran teacher, then you know that self-reflection and being able to say, "Ooh, I missed the mark on that," or knowing your students and then using that within your reflection to say, "This worked well, this doesn't work well." um, it's good, but it can also be seen as negative, especially if the teacher is always like, the veteran teacher is always like, "No, I don't want to do it that way. I've always done it this way." Um, Instead of saying that, how about you explain based on your reflection and practices of what you've encountered? So that's kind of what this strategy is, teaching students how to be self reflective, and teaching students how to reflect on their work and how to identify their strengths and weaknesses, because all these things help improve your outcome in the future. And this being part of a growth mindset. All right. Now that we've talked about these different strategies, let me go over those strategies again. So the first one we talked about was elicit instruction, and that's basically just direct instruction. The next one that we identified was cooperative learning and learning in groups. The next effective strategy that we talked about was differentiating your instructions. We talked about your formative assessments and the purpose of those assessments. And we talked about technology, the purpose of technology and integrating technology. And then we talked about including the students' cultural backgrounds into your responsive teaching. And then we talked about, lastly, we identified reflective practice. So now within our groups, we're going to take a moment and we're going to identify. We're going to first work independently, and I'm going to give everybody 4 minutes. Again, I'm going to give you 4 minutes to identify which strategies or strategy do you use most often, and then which one would you like to strengthen, and then what barriers prevent implementation. So let's take a moment to do that. Once they've identified what strategies they use most often, because most of these strategies teachers already use, they don't necessarily know the academic word for it, but they're already using these strategies. They're already, rethinking, reteaching, having clear expectations, knowing who their students are, incorporating their students' cultural backgrounds. So now we just got to identify which one they use the most and then talk about which one would you like to strengthen and then what barriers prevent implementation. And what I found for the barriers that present implementation, a lot of teachers will say, well, my kids get off task. That's why I don't really work in groups. And then that's why I made it a point to talk about how if you start out at the beginning of the school year with cooperative groups and you set those clear norms and expectations, and you understand that groups don't work themselves, you have to train your kids to work the groups, then you can do cooperative groups in almost any class. But again, you have to teach your kids to work the groups. And I was just in a classroom, a class evaluation for an Algebra 2 class last week, and the teacher was having her annual evaluation, and she was teaching, is it synthetic equations? Yeah, I think it was synthetic lunar equations, something like that. And she was doing it in cooperative groups. And instantly, I knew that those students weren't used to cooperative groups because they weren't. Instead of talking and asking the people in their groups, they kept raising their hand and asking the teacher. That was one way that I could recognize that they weren't used to doing those cooperative groups. Um, another observation was I knew that the teacher had been intentional about the group she made. So she put thought into that. But because it wasn't something that she regularly do, she missed that point of it. Because she should have said, all right, before you can ask me a question, you had to ask, because they were in groups of 4. You got to at least ask 2 people in your group the question. And if no one in the group can answer the question, then you raise your hand. But more importantly, when I get over there, I'm going to go, well, who did you ask? Point to them. And oftentimes that takes away half the hands that are up in the class. So once we do this activity as a group, we'll then share out what we've learned. Um, we'll start with which strategies do you use the most. I'll say how many people already use this strategy. What have you found to be something that prevents implementation, or what was your experience like? So that hopefully someone who wants to use that strategy will listen, learn from what the other teacher has done. And then which one of those strategies would you like to strengthen? A lot of times, uh, a lot of the teachers, again, because I teach geography, I'm always able to incorporate people's culture. I always have like, what's the holiday today? The kids are always like, what's the holiday today? Because we begin every unit around the world with the holidays. So I just tell teachers, like take sometimes take a little short, have a little brain break in the middle of your lesson where you just tell a little joke, like a dad joke, or have the kids take a moment to, um, describe what they did over the weekend, so that themselves can kind of introduce themselves to each other. So moving on. Next. So now that we're coming to the end of our professional development of effective teaching strategies, can you now identify evidence-based teaching strategies? Well, yes, you can. You can identify those. We talked about them. Elicit, cooperative, technology integration. What else? Differentiated instructions, formative assessments. Can you explore methods of differentiating instructions? Well, yes, you can, because we've talked about those. We said that you can differentiate instructions. You can do that through your you can do that through your content of what the students are learning. You can do that through your process. You can do that through your product, and you can do that through your environment. You don't have to do that through all of them, but just try to pick one to try to attack every day. So being very intentional about your lesson and very intentional about what you want students to learn. And then next, learning practical classroom applications of how to integrate technology. Again, technology serves as an enhancement. And I don't think a lot of teachers know that if you reach out to the technology department, they will be more than happy to come over and teach your student. Or if you have a media specialist, which is your librarian in most schools, they are more than happy to come in your classroom and like introduce these new technology apps, etc. And then more importantly, teach your students how they can enhance and further their learning. So the application of how to integrate technology, and then reflecting on your own instructional practices by deciding which one of these do you do most often, and then more importantly, which one would you like to strengthen, and then reflect on how you can adapt strategies to your own classroom by talking about what barriers you would be presented with, but more importantly, how you overcome those barriers. All right, lastly, now, do we have any questions, answers? Do we have any questions? All right, again, my name is Rosalind Lawrence. I want to leave you with this one thought. I hope that this was very informative to you and very helpful. I also want you to know that the information you sent in to me at the beginning that you filled out, I will share out and put it in a Google spreadsheet. I will upload this, and hopefully that helps further your learning community with the people at your table, with the people you've heard talk, because you can reach out to them directly to get their expertise in whichever one of these strategies to help you implement these strategies in your class this week. And here's the resources for where I got this information. All right. Thank you.